Welcome, friends of Powerhouse Bakery and all my favorite divas and dudes out there. It's great to have you back here in the bakery. And so I want to talk with you today about some exciting things that are going on in the news. With COVID-19 hitting everybody around the world, there's so much question about what can we do to improve our resilience, improve our immunity, and how do we just stay healthier as a people. And so what I want to talk with you today about is how a plant-based diet is going to help us build our immune system. There's been a lot of research way back in the 80s from Dr. Colin Campbell about the value of a plant-based diet. And the 80s up to now 2020, there's been a lot of time passed. And the sad part is because a plant-based diet didn't used to be very glamorous, it's starting to get a little more momentum, mainly because of some of the shows we've seen on Netflix and on the web. But it's starting to gain momentum because some of the big leaders in our culture are starting to follow a plant-based diet. So when athletes start waving the flag of something, I think we normal, people want to listen and figure out if they're doing it, maybe there's something to be said. But the scientists, for many years, have been debating what type of eating style is overall healthier for people. So in the early 80s and even in the 70s, there was a pretty strong debate on whether or not we needed as much protein as we do, and if we were going to get the protein from a plant-based source, was that in fact as easy and as valuable to absorb as the we call the perfect protein, which we've been sort of taught is red meat, and of course poultry and fish are right behind it. So now, most recently, we're starting to really look back at some of that research, and the China study is a renowned body of research that's really looked at several different bodies of evidence to give the debate really a lot of punch behind it, that a plant-based diet can absolutely help with our immune system. When Colin Campbell did the research, he was looking at the China population and then eventually the Taiwanese population. And these people groups were the opposite of the Western culture, being the wealthy Western eating style. They ate a lot of plants, and when we look at them as a people group, and we find that they had very low incidence of cancer, very low incidence of diabetes and cardiovascular disease, we start wondering, well, what was it about their style of eating that helped to them? And so one of the things about the research that I think is most interesting is when we look at people over a long period of time, so a longitudinal study or an epidemiological study, it looks at people that don't even know they're being tested. It's looking back to say, what happened with this group of people, and can we learn from them? So now fast forward to now, people that are trying to improve their immune system to better fight off viruses. I think it's very pertinent for us all. How do we learn from the people in the history of research and scientific study? How do we learn from what they've done and be able to do a better job today? We know that cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and of course other diseases related to obesity are diseases that we call of the wealthy. Heart disease and diabetes, we know, are very much related to being overweight. So the people group that we're learning about did not have much obesity at all. They, in fact, struggled to get enough. And so they were a very interesting group, because then we were really understanding that maybe what we thought of as being the right amount of calories, the right amount of protein, maybe contributed to some of these disease states that we struggle with now. The other big section of Colin Campbell's study is not only looking at those lifestyle diseases, but also to viruses. And so one thing that's very provocative in his body of study is looking at what happens to people that had hepatitis B. I'm just going to abbreviate it, Hep B. We know that Hep B is a virus. And of course, we all know what we're trying to fight right now, which is a very unusual virus. Well, we know that in general, viruses are tricky critters because they mutate. We know that when we have the flu vaccine, every year the scientists are trying to guesstimate, well, what should we do to combat this new virus? And the studies that were done years ago on hepatitis B patients were, in fact, in these third world countries, specifically Africa. They looked at these folks that were suffering from hepatitis B, and they tried to learn, well, why are some of these people groups doing better than others? And what they found was every time there was a people group that had more vegetables in their diet, they had better antibodies to that certain virus, the hepatitis B. And so we started to really understand that there's something about this. Whenever we have higher intake of vegetables, as well as the protein from vegetables, something happened to their immune system. It seemed to get stronger. And so now with Colin Campbell's research, he's trying to understand how is it that our antibodies get improved on diet, especially when we're trying to fight something that is in our environment. So we know that the coronavirus is in our environment and it's mutating, and it's really taken us for a storm because we can't seem to get a handle on this virus and understand how do we fight it off better. Well, we're hoping, of course, that we're going to come up with a vaccine. A vaccine is basically giving our bodies some of the antigen to the virus. So if we have a host, which would be like people, if we have a host and this virus is floating around and it has receptor sites, but it cannot replicate without a DNA. So this virus is going to go into the host, aka humans, or bats, as the case might have been with the coronavirus, and it's going to use our DNA to replicate. So that virus has to get into the host and replicate to make more virus. Okay, and that's how it spreads to other people. So it's spread in our bodily fluids because it's now in our host and it is in our bodily fluids, and that's how it travels around our body and creates all kinds of havoc. So when we have a strong host, this host is able to create some antibodies, because what happens is our body recognizes this virus as being foreign. So as soon as our body realizes that there's a foreign critter going around, so we start making an antigen to fight off that virus. And so what's really exciting is that if we create a healthier body, we are going to be able to make the antibodies that fight off this virus. And so when we think about how do we make our bodies healthy, we know that we need several things, and you've heard me talk about these before. We need our macronutrients. The protein is really key because protein helps to rebuild cells. We want to rebuild our skin cells, our bone, even our blood. So of course protein is really important. We also know that every time we have protein that comes from animals, it's going to come with sometimes an ingredient that's not so healthy, and that would be a fat that makes our blood thick and makes it hard for those important cells to move around in the body. So sometimes we want to try to figure out how do we get the most bang for our buck. And that's where Colin Campbell's research is starting to really focus on. We're trying to figure out what components are going to be best in fighting an inflammation process. So an inflammation process is when our body notices that there's a foreign body that it's going to fight against. So inflammation is a good thing. Inflammation is our body building up those white blood cells, I call them, or the antibodies in our white blood in order to fight off that critter that is now foreign. We get confused though, because inflammation is a healthy response, but if it goes chronically, now we can't seem to get over that inflammation, and then our body's good response turns into something that's not so good. So we want to have inflammation that is targeted very specifically to whatever foreign body is now in our system. We also want to know, how do we make sure that that inflammation goes away really quickly? So we fight off a critter and we take care of it and we get rid of it. Again, that's making sure that we have good nutrition in our bodies so that we can build those white blood cells and then we can go back to a neutral state, which is not being inflamed. So that requires a couple of different nutrients. So on my notes here, what I tried to show you is the inflammation fighting diet is going to be made of, again, those bright colors. There's some specific spices, of course the dark leafy greens, certain fruits, of course nuts, tomatoes, and of course our favorite beans and legumes and lentils that are part of that category. And what's really key is that these antioxidants prevent cell damage. And so the oxidation process is what is killing the cells with those bad critters that come in, like the coronavirus. And so the antioxidants are the ones that stop that free radical. So I know that's a lot of science talk, but in general, what I wanted to really share with you is some of the most valuable nutrients that we have to help us fight off the antibodies. We want to build those antibodies. So when I did a little bit of research, what I found was what would be the top foods. And when we start looking at the top foods, we do see some different recommendations out there. But one of them that's kind of tried and true is what I call the ORC value. And it's going to be based on the vitamins and the minerals and the antioxidants that are found in these bright colors. So here are some beautiful products that I've pulled out of my garden. I have some spinach that I've been growing, so I pulled that out. I did some slivers of beets, which are in my garden as well, and some beautiful fresh tomatoes and some cucumbers, and then the almighty turmeric. So here are some beautiful colors that without a doubt are going to be sources of those antioxidants. And so what we want to do is learn about how to really maximize these nutrients so that we can get some nutritional value to build our immune system and really help our body, which is our host. The body is the host, and we want to make sure that we get as much nutrients in there to build our immune system so that inflammation response is quick, it's powerful, and it goes away fast. So that's what I want to show you today. So when we look at the nutrient-rich colors, there's a form that, there's a way that the scientists study that, and it's they put it into a term, and all of the fruits and vegetables and spices and nuts are measured according to this term, and it's abbreviated ORAC, and it's referring to the oxidative process. Remember, we want an antioxidant, so how much power do these different vegetables have to fight off the oxidation process? So oxidative, resorption, so how much can these nutrients absorb of the free radicals? So oxidative, resorption, capacity is going to be so valuable in those different nutrients. So ORAC, absorbency, is that real trick. The absorption of those free radicals is ORAC. Okay, so let's look at a few of these. So when I looked into a couple of the different tables and charts, sometimes it surprised me. You might have heard me talk about goji berries and cherries. Those are very high oxidative measurements, and those are the fruits. So we love cherries. They're actually in season right now. Goji berries are also really popular and a great way to add into a salad or a grain dish. Very low in sugar, very high in antioxidants. So those are big wins. And you probably know the other one, blueberries. Again, it kind of gives it away by the color. Bright blue, bright reds, definite win when it comes to those brightness. The other ones that are really beautiful are tomatoes. So the lycopene that's in tomatoes is absolutely a big player when it comes to the oxidative reaction absorbency capacity. So tomatoes were big hitters. And then of course our beautiful turmeric, another big hitter. And notice here it's a beautiful little root, and all I need to do is with a potato peeler take off that outside, and we have the beautiful color of the turmeric. And whenever you can, try to use that turmeric in its fresh form, but if you need to, you can also buy it powdered, and it's a great way to go. So what else do I have here on my list of the super nutrient rich spices? Here's one that is such a fun one, dark chocolate. So dark chocolate is going to be a perfect way to get your super nutrient-rich antioxidant power. We want to make sure that when you get dark chocolate, it is not a milk chocolate. Dark chocolate powder should not have any sugars added. If you want to pick out a good quality dark chocolate, look for something that is 80% or more cacao. Oops. Cacao. 80% or more is the way to go. The other one that kind of surprised me, which I hadn't seen in some of the different databases that I looked at, was cloves. Cloves and cinnamon are way up there in nutrient quality. So using cinnamon and cloves in a lot of things during the day is a great way to add very important qualities to your meals. So remember, it's not just the vitamins and the minerals. We're looking at those plant-based phytochemicals that do a little bit more than just your average fat-soluble or water-soluble vitamin. So we've got blueberries, cherries, goji berries, beautiful tomatoes, especially if you can grow them at home and make sure they're organic. Great way to go. Dark chocolate, awesome. And don't forget our turmeric. Now, interesting that we've got all the colors of the rainbow noted as well. I mentioned already the blues and the reds. We've got different hues of reds, even some purples worked in there. And then the dark chocolate, which is our rich black, which is so beautiful. And then the turmeric, which is the bright orange. And then we also have the dried herbs. So oregano and rosemary are probably on the top of the list too. Rosemary is so easy to grow. If you've seen my my video on how to plant a garden, if you haven't done that yet, rosemary is absolute for sure. It's an easy one to do, and it's so pretty. It'll last year round. You can keep it trimmed so it doesn't get too woody, and it's a beautiful one. What I have here is organic oregano, so I also want to include that one. So where rosemary is easy to use fresh, I recommend doing oregano dried. Oregano fresh is a little bit bitter, and the dried version is going to be much easier to work with and have a beautiful way to add into sauces and spices. So now let me show you some ways that we can kind of play around with these and make some sauces and some spice blends that'll make it really fun and easy to work with. So what I'm going to do is make a spice blend. So in general, when we do spice blends, we want to have something that is savory, something that's, so savory is not sweet and it's not sour. It's that other flavor that we like to talk about. And so what I'm going to do is add to my dish. And I'm going to use all the big hitters. I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil, and then you can always add in lemon juice or orange juice, which is one of my absolute favorite ways to add in the acidity. So we're gonna dress our spinach salad with this little blend, and I'm gonna make a couple of different ones so you can see the variety that comes up. So we're gonna start with our beautiful spices, and I want you to see how I kind of start with the process. So I'm going to go ahead and add in my spices, and when you're experimenting, you want to start small, and I like to typically go with my favorite flavor first. Do I want it to be a little more chocolatey, or do I want it to be a little bit more herby, like with the oregano? So I'm going to start with the chocolate because that's kind of fun. So I'm going to do about half a teaspoon, and I'm going to add my cinnamon. This is a blend of cinnamon and cloves together. So I'm going to put that in my dish, and now I'm going to add in my wet So the two wet items are going to be the orange juice, or you could use lemon. You could also use rice vinegar. Lots of choices here to make it really pretty. Let's start with a half of an orange. I'm just going to blend, and make sure you've got your spinach or maybe some cucumber nearby so you can sample. But I'm going to add in a little bit of orange juice, and we're going to usually do, if you can do like just enough for one salad, I think that's the best approach. So if you don't have your rammer nearby, just using a fork or a knife or even a spoon to squeeze out all your beautiful fresh orange juice, that's the way to go. So I used about a tablespoon and a half of orange juice, or about a half of an orange. You can kind of see how I'm just adding as I go. So this is going to be a sauce for my spinach salad, dark chocolate, unsweet, a little bit of cinnamon and cloves and orange juice. And now I'm going to add the olive oil, which is going to add the body. So it's going to be about 1/4 cup. And of course, chocolate is hydrophobic, meaning it does not like to mix well, but that's okay. We're going to make it mix. It's going to be beautiful. And when I finish off this salad, I'm going to do fresh ground pepper and a little bit of Himalayan sea salt. But that is absolutely beautiful. That's just the texture I want. It's got a little bit of bubbles in there, but that's going to dissolve as I let it sit for just a minute. And that's the dark chocolate just slowly working into the liquid form. But look at how pretty that is. Again, I could add some balsamic vinegar if I wanted to make it a little bit more astringent, but I kind of like the sweetness of the dark chocolate with the orange. So that's absolutely beautiful. Perfect. And it's a great finish off if I wanted to use maybe some nuts on the top. I could toast some almonds and put that in. It would be absolutely beautiful. I'm going to show you one more before we're out of time. I'm going to go on the savory side now. So I'm going to use my oregano. So about a teaspoon of oregano and my turmeric. So again, equal ratio is a good place to start, especially if you're not quite sure where you want to go with the flavors. And now I'm going to add some lemon. Again, I'm using a half a lemon first. Oop, I got a couple seeds in there, so I'll have to fish those out. Starting out, and so of course lemon is a little more astringent than orange, but it actually works so well with the oregano. And I can always add in a little rice vinegar if I wanted to make it a little bit sweeter. So look how pretty this is going to be. And again, this is going to go on my spinach salad. And I can absolutely add a little rice vinegar if I need more liquid. I could add a sesame oil if I wanted to pull in that flavor. I'm going to give it a little more lemon juice. Because you noticed before it was, on that first one, it was a little bit thinner. And that's because the orange just gave up a little more liquid. Yeah, see, that's going to be very nice. Adding a little bit of sea salt to taste and fresh ground pepper is the way to finish off that salad. But see, look, that's perfect. Perfect little paste. Now I'm going to add in the oil, about 1/4 cup. Yeah, see, that's looking so pretty. So don't feel like you have to make a lot of salad dressing when you're doing this. I think the best way, and it's kind of the way I learned from the French family that I lived with out of high school, they just made the salad dressing just as they were putting the table together for their big meal in the midday. So see, that looks really pretty. The turmeric is also somewhat hydrophobic, so it takes it a few minutes to kind of stir up, but it definitely gets there. Okay, and so here's our 2 different sauces, absolutely gorgeous. And now I'm going to set up your plates. So here I'm going to show you the 2 different platters, and they look absolutely gorgeous. I'm going to do a smaller bowl so I can kind of do my toss and get the colors well distributed with my sauces. Stir them around a little bit. There we go. So you want to well coat the leaves and then just drop them onto the plate. So beautiful. And now for my next one. So this is my chocolate sauce, and here comes the turmeric. So again, just doing small batches gives you lots of control over how you want to present, and also If you want to adjust the flavor a little bit, you can always do that. So I'm just going to add a teaspoon at a time of this beautiful turmeric dressing and just a gentle toss. Yeah, that's going to be so pretty. So again, in the plate, I added some fresh turmeric slices, so you can see those beautiful slivers that are coming out. And then if I wanted to add a little bit of fresh ground pepper at the very end, I could. And of course, I love to add a garnish. That's where my kiwi comes in. There we go. You could also add a beautiful orange slice. So in review, what's really important is more plant-based eating is going to allow us to absolutely build our immune system. We want to have a strong host, and we do that by adding more plant-based foods, especially the big hitters, the powerhouse spices that are bright colors. So think of purple and blue and red and orange, and you've got a beautiful salad ready to go. And if you can, start a garden. If you haven't already planted some rosemary, do that, because that's an easy one. Here are some beautiful tomatoes from my garden, and it adds so much to the table. And also, nothing says lovin' like something from the oven, but also something from your garden. So have fun with it, and here is your beautiful salad options, fully loaded with antioxidants. So have fun. See you soon.